Since 2017, 150,000 farms have shut down. Working farmland has been reduced by 21 million acres. The system has been crippling the remaining farmers, forcing some to adopt nefarious farming techniques, like pumping hormones and other performance-enhancing drugs into their cows so they can survive in crammed feedlots. Or the farmers are forced to jump ship and sell to land-hoarding, profit-chasing agricultural oligarchies, who use their billions of dollars to crush the competition and increase your family's dependence on their manufactured food. What could possibly go wrong? The family farm will soon be a thing of the past, unless you do something. You can. That's why there's From the Farm, an industry-disrupting platform that connects consumers directly with local farmers, which means you can buy fresh, non-factory farm food, and you'll know exactly where your food came from and how it was raised. For the first time in nearly 100 years, independent farms will have a way to not only survive, but thrive. From the Farm was founded by A.J. Richards, an active homesteader, and Brooke Ents, a CrossFit Games athlete and an Amazonian warrior in the movies Wonder Woman and Justice League. She clearly has a passion for healthy food and a healthy lifestyle. And since both A.J. and Brooke come from generations of ranchers and farmers, they know what they're talking about. We can't do this alone. We need the strength of the American people behind us. Help us build a new food system that combines the wisdom of the past with the technology of the future. Investing in From the Farm isn't just a financial decision. It's an investment into our future, our small family farms, and our food sovereignty. Invest today.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of From the Farm. Today I'm joined by Casey Murph. Casey Murph is a fourth generation rancher into the fifth with his kids out of northern Arizona, just close to the northeast. Northeast sounds like up there by Arizona. Is that up by Snowflake, Sholo area?
It is, yeah. We're all in Navajo County, Snowflake being about 30 miles south of me.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. Yeah. So Casey's been out there for multiple generations, just as our family, my family, the Bundys have. And in fact, we just found out as we were talking that Casey showed up for the showdown under the bridge to support my family when they were dealing with all that crap in 2014. And so grateful for you, doing what you did, because they had a lot of support. But man, I keep telling folks there, people are always like, man, farmers need to do in the U.S. what they're doing in the U.K. and in Europe. And I said, no, the consumers need to be doing what the farmers are doing in the U.S. and the U.K. Our farmers should stay in the field and continue to produce food for us that need it. And we need to be the one defending our food. So anyway, Casey, why don't you just introduce yourself, if you don't mind, and let us know a little bit about you and your operation, and we can jump into it.
Okay. This ranch was started when my great-grandfather came to Arizona. He was a orphan from the Civil War, and as a teenage boy, he got a job building a railroad across northern Arizona. And that railroad company, the Atchison, Topeka, Santa Fe, was cash poor, so they quite often would offer land, because they received a lot of land from the government. They would offer land to workers in exchange of wages. And great-granddad took him up on that, and that's how he got started ranching here. And,
what year was that?
Well, he came in 1879.
Okay.
But he worked as a freighter for another couple of decades, hauling freight down to Fort Apache while he was trying to build up enough resources to start a herd. And when he actually was able to start a herd I think it was 1904. So it was quite a while that he was here in the territory before he got the ranch really started. Yeah,
great. And you guys do you do cattle? Do you do anything other than cattle, or are you focused just on cattle?
We're a cow-calf operation with horses used as tools in the pursuit of them.
Yeah, great. And you were telling me before we got started, how is your operation structured? Do you have private ground with lease ground? This is something that like the consumers don't really understand how this all works, especially with this. There's a lot of discussion with the land sell-off and so forth. And so there's a lot that consumers don't know. and don't really take into consideration. So that's why I'm asking these questions. So how does your operation work? What's your grazing ground like?
Okay, we have 7 sections, each section being 640 acres. We have 7 sections of deeded ground that my great-grandfather got from the railroad years ago. The rest of the ranch is in state lease ground that we lease from the state of Arizona, and there are some checkerboard properties that we have adverse grazing rights on. So
Okay.
in total, there's 22 sections that the cows range on. It's high desert country. We get 5 to 7 inches of rain a year, so it's pretty dry and pretty sparse, but still with that, I can provide enough beef to feed about 100 families with that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. So one of the things that a lot of folks aren't aware of is AUMs. How many cattle you are allowed to run. You know, they see these big swaths of land and they think that you can just shove it full of cattle. And so describe a little bit for the folks listening how you can choose stock density, or how stock density works for you in your particular operation. Who makes those rules?
Well, on my operation, it's theoretically set by the state of Arizona, the state land department, the animal units per month that we can run, right? But in my case, it's kind of interesting because this lease was established prior to statehood. And when Arizona was first made a state, they set the AUMs, but they set the AUMs really a lot higher than what the place can run now. Now, I don't go to the state though and tell them that. I go ahead and pay for the entire AUMs that the state says I can run, and I run like only 25% of that. But I don't want, to tell the state that my ranch is in bad shape and have them come decide that they need to cut my numbers. By just paying them the extra, I can kind of set for myself safely what I can run. And luckily, I do have some rangeland education, so that helps with that.
Yeah, great. What would you say would be one of the most important things in your mind that consumers should know about cattle operations, cow, calf, all the way through to their plate? What do you think's missing in their education or their knowledge to have them be connected to y'all more?
I think what am I going to focus on, AJ? Because there's so many things. So if I'm going to focus on the most important thing, I would probably say that a lot of this country out in the West that people think is desolate does in fact support cows and calves, and you might not see them from the road, but there are, that country is being used to provide beef to consumers, even if you can't see the cows. And so those of us who are out here really are doing a pretty good service, in my opinion, because we're taking some of this harsh country that consists of stuff like salt brush that people certainly can't eat, and we're turning that into high density protein for people.
Right.
And we're very happy to do it.
Yeah. So you were 4th generation, and you've now got kids that are getting into it, and they're going to take it over. That's into the 5th generation. Is that correct?
Right.
Yeah. How many kids do you have?
I've got 3 kids. I've got one that is connected to me by blood, and 2 that I adopted that are still my kids.
Yeah, great. And are they all on the ranch, or do they all want to be in the lifestyle?
One boy wants to be in the lifestyle. My daughter has decided she doesn't want anything to do with this lifestyle, which is fine. Yeah. She has that choice. And my other boy, doesn't really want to work day to day in the ranch, but is happy to help with branding and things like that.
Yeah. Do you guys do any direct to consumer, or as a cow calf operation, you guys go right to auction?
We have started trying to go direct to consumer where we can, and we've
Mhm.
just started it. But so far, it's been working really good, and it's only been word of mouth stuff. And the way we work that is people will ask us if we have any steers that are going to be ready for butcher. And what we do is we actually sell them the steer, and then we keep that steer here on the ranch, and then we feed them according to whatever specifications they want. If they want them grain fed for 60 days or 90 days or whatever, I'll do that here. And then I will, at the appropriate time, I will deliver the animal to a butcher that I have a relationship with in town. And then they go pick up their beef from the butcher.
Yeah, great. That's I'm happy to hear y'all are getting into that. Or was it uncomfortable, or were you nervous getting into it? I mean, I've talked to producers that, we take pride in our work, most of us, no matter what we're doing. And so finishing out a beef and wanting to make sure it's tastes right and everything. So have you done it enough in the past to not worry about it, where you kind of had it down? You said you had some background in this stuff, so you probably weren't too worried about finishing rations.
Right. Yeah, I had an idea what to do, but I was still kind of nervous because these are desert cows,
Yeah.
and our customers had only eaten beef out of the store, and I didn't know. I've eaten this beef my whole life, but I didn't know if they were going to like it.
Yeah.
So far, everybody seems to be pretty happy.
Yeah.
But I was pretty nervous about it when we started out.
Yeah. I remember when I started selling beef for my cousin, Ramsey Hughes, out of Southern Utah. Same thing. We were all nervous, like, okay, it's our first time doing this, so let's make sure we get this right. And, we grew up eating the cull cows off the ranch, and those were just sagebrush tasting sons of guns. So in our head, we're thinking, that's who wants to buy that? But of course, we finished them better for those folks, our customers, than we do for ourselves.
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah, that's great.
That's what we did too. We ate old cows. Steers, good steers were worth too much money to eat yourself. So
yeah, that's right. Yeah. I think I lost you. Dang it. Let's see.
So yeah, we've been doing that. Well,
I'm here. Yep.
How about it? Yeah. Okay. So yeah, we've been doing this for about 6 years now, providing directly to consumer, and every year we're doing a little bit more. We started out just 3, and now we're doing a corral full, and we can't really meet the demand for a lot of people yet. So everything I save my very best for the consumer deal, and the rest I take to the market. But we're hoping to expand more and more and do more and more of this.
Yeah, great. So you got a pretty solid packer you can count on, a meat packer where you're at, to help you scale, or you can scale into that.
Yeah, there's a guy. Yeah, there's a guy here in town, and I've known him my whole life. I knew his dad, and he's just got a little local independent butcher shop. But I trust him, and so far it's worked out really good. He's been really good with all of the customers, and yeah, it's working out. It's working out great. The only problem is this guy's going to retire, and there's really not a lot of young people that seem to want to get into butchering.
Yeah.
Yeah. Matter of fact, I would suggest some of these young people out there maybe consider that.
Yeah, I just was saying the other day that a young person getting into butchering could do really well for himself in a pretty short time once they get the skill down. I mean, the slaughterhouse I was running, we were paying skilled butchers $30 an hour, $35 an hour starting if they had the skills to cut a beef. And doesn't take very long if you have a good work ethic and you show up every day and you want to learn. You can learn how to be a really dang good butcher, And I think as the consumer demand starts shifting more towards the producer, there's going to be there's already a demand in a deficit in slaughter. So as this consumer direct starts growing, I think a young man or
Right.
woman could do really well for themselves being a butcher.
I think so too. Yeah. I mean, it's going to require some investment, and it's going to require, getting some expertise and stuff, but that's with any career, right? So I would definitely, I was talking to one of my boys about perhaps doing that. He's thinking about it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. So you guys got a little bit of customer direct that you're working on. You've been cow-calf your whole have you been cow-calf the entire time you've been in this? I guess with the kind of ground you're on would
Yeah.
make sense. Yeah.
Yeah. That's all we've ever done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask your thoughts because it's a hot topic right now, and being a rancher and having lease ground and being in the West, your thoughts on this land sell-off. I mean, I had a discussion with it earlier this week with a couple of guys, and I just remember growing up, I mean, even with Cliven, he's paying the federal government and they're using that money to regulate him out of business. So he's like, I ain't paying you, I'm paying the states. That's how the Constitution was written. They should be the ones controlling this now anyway, right? So I grew up believing that the federal government shouldn't have this much land. And
Right.
technically, according to the Constitution, they're not supposed to. But now they're rushing to sell this stuff off. And I'm like, okay, hold up. We wanted this, but now I'm not sure I want it the way, that we want it the way you're doing it. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on this whole movement right now.
I have always been somebody that has been against the federal government owning all this land in the West. I've always thought the states should have that land.
Yeah.
But I have learned through personal experience that the states can be a little tricky about this stuff too, because most of these Western states have language in their constitutions that they have to dispose of that land for the most money that they can get out of it. So, if we were to just turn these lands over to the states the way things are right now, none of us ranchers are going to be safe, especially with all these renewables, because the renewables are taking over everybody in my area right now. And, and the state is just perfectly happy to hand these state lands over to these renewable companies. So, while I am against the federal government owning this land, I still think it ought to be multiple use. And I think ranchers ought to be here using that land, but I think hunters ought to be able to use that land, and hikers and campers and people who want to ride horseback, because, as well as I do, when you grow up in the rural West, you kind of get used to being able to just drive 10 minutes from your house and be out in some sagebrush where you can hunt jackrabbits, right? And I don't think we ought to be messing with that, So I think we need to be just real careful. Some of these politicians, I think, are not really having the best interest of the rural Westerners at heart with some of the plans that they're making, and I do not trust them.
Yeah, and that's the biggest issue is the trust has been lost. So even though we used to think that we wanted the federal government to let it go, now we don't trust you well enough to make the right decision on who gets to control it. And they keep talking about, affordable housing, but first of all, like all the land that they're planning on making available in southern Utah, where I'm from, that St. George area, I'm like, where's the water? You're talking about building thousands. I mean, already the growth in southern Utah and St. George isn't sustainable. And now you're talking about opening up more federal land for more housing. Where's the water coming from? And, you're only producing 4% of the food for that community, if you're even producing 4% for that community. And now you're going to explode the population.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. St. George is a real good example.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you take a town like St. George, or you take a town like say Colorado Springs, Colorado, ask somebody who's been in those towns for a long time if it has been a benefit to see the explosive growth that they've had there in the last 20 years. I don't think anybody's going to say it's been a benefit.
Yeah, no, unless you're a builder. if you're a builder, you'll say there's a benefit. I had a meeting in 2021. I was trying to build a slaughterhouse in southern Utah because when I was selling for my cousin, COVID hit, and we were going direct to consumer. We started selling direct to consumer in 2019, and our business was growing. It was doing well. We were getting new monthly subscribers on all the time, and we called to get slaughter, April, May of 2020. And they're like, yeah, we'll see you in 18 months. And I was like, what? Last week you could get 5 in this week, what happened? So we were bouncing all over the state of Utah, squeezing in anywhere we could possibly get in. Just wasn't sustainable. So I tried to look into building a slaughterhouse down there. And anyway, I went and met with one of the mayors in southern Utah. And he basically said, we're not interested. We're not going to help. We don't see why that's a need. And they just don't get it. And before I left, I said, okay, no problem. I said, Mayor, before I leave, your whole platform that you ran on this year was for water conservation. And I'm curious what that plan is. Like what are you doing for water conservation? How are you going to solve this problem? And he goes, well, I'll tell you, but you're not going to like it. He said, we're going to take it from the ranches and give it to the builders. And I didn't even bother sticking around for a conversation because after I heard how moronic. Yeah. Turns out he also owns a plumbing supply store.
Yeah, they're going to take all that irrigation water.
Yep.
Yeah. The Southwest, we just don't have a lot of water, man. We don't have it, and you can't make water out of nothing. Southern Utah has more water than northern Arizona, where I am, does, but it doesn't have a lot. So, those creeks, you can wade across any of those creeks. So there's not a lot of water there. They just cannot sustain this stuff. And unless they're talking about building a pipeline of desalinated seawater over the Sierras, I don't see how they're going to sustain the kind of growth that they anticipate.
Right. Casey, are there any policies that affect your business that you're paying attention to that you'd like to see change? Like what's really making it hard as a producer for you in particular right now? Is there anything that's on the top of your head? Like you've got mandatory country of origin labeling, you've got the antitrust laws, all these different things. Is there any one thing in particular that you kind of think on regularly that you feel would make a big difference if we could get it to go the rancher's way?
Well, my deal, anybody who's ever followed me on X knows that my deal is really focused on the encroachment on rangeland by renewable energy, the wind turbines and the solar, because that stuff is just hitting me hard here. And there really isn't any regard to agriculture when it comes to that stuff. They just take what they want. If you're in an area that is within a proximity to a power line that they want to be able to access, your country, whether it's your deeded country or your lease ground, BLM or state, is subject to being taken by this stuff. And I know one rancher down by the Palo Verde nuclear solar farm, and 3 ranchers here have been put out of business for some big solar projects they're doing. So that is really my main thing right now. That's what's on top of me every day, right? So I would like to see a policy shift. I'm not against renewables. I'm not against solar, but I wish we would shift the policy towards siting these places in places that's not going to threaten agriculture. And ranching is agriculture, right? It might just look like scrubland, but there's ranching going on. Let's put that renewable on brown lands. Let's put it on over parking lots. Let's put it places like that. Let's not put it over farmlands and ranch lands. I think that's kind of a no-brainer.
Yeah.
A lot of the other stuff that I really am concerned about I'm a real big fan of the McCool thing. I want that back. And the electronic ID tags make me really nervous. I don't like that. I don't see any good reason for doing that other than just monitoring how many cows we have and where they are.
Yeah.
So those are the three things that are right on top of me right now. Underneath that's going to be the wolf reintroductions, and then from there, I think we'd be getting down into the more tertiary things as far as things that affect me directly.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, the MCOOL mandatory country of origin labeling is a big push that a lot of folks are trying to get back. I mean, it's already in place. They just repealed it, so it just needs to be turned back on. There's a lot of push for that, and I think that they're finally listening.
Right.
I'd be surprised
Right.
if it doesn't get changed by next year because they are listening. So that's good. The EID is interesting. Not interesting. It's not a good idea. It's funny though, because I was gathering cattle with my cousin up on Pine Valley Mountain, which is burning up right now there in southern Utah. But we were gathering cattle, and this was like 2019. I'd never heard of a RFID or whatever, and I was like, "Hey, what if we could make an ear tag that you could see on a tracker so you knew exactly where your cattle were, and we could get them all gathered in a day instead of a week?" And he's like, "Well, that might be interesting because I got my dogs and they have collars, but if my dog goes in a canyon, the radio signal doesn't work. So you'd have to have some satellite deals." So we were brainstorming all this stuff. And then a couple years later, RFIDs come out and I'm like, oh man, that's not a good idea. Because what I learned, I got a friend that ranches on a forest lease for his summer ground. And he moves his cattle to a BLM lease on his winter ground. But there's a 1 month difference from when he has to be off forest, and there's a gap where he's not allowed to be on BLM. And I'm like, how do you do that? And he goes, well, it's hard to see the cattle through the trees, so I just get away with it. We just do it slowly. But then I started thinking about that RFID and what the implications of that could be on him. And I'm thinking, if they can track every head of cattle and now assess a penalty for every day they're not off the ground, but he doesn't have a choice because two agencies aren't talking to each other, now they'll put him out of business just in the fees, fines and fees alone, because now they can track exactly his movements. I'm like, no, there are so many other things in the system broken, but they're going to put all the burden on the cattlemen and none of it on the agencies or whoever else that's calling the actual shots. Right. So, yeah.
It makes me nervous, but talking about what you were, about locating cattle, I can understand that. I used to run a Forest Service allotment. We were supposed to be off of it by the 1st of November, and I was always hunting remnants until January. I usually would wait till it snowed and then track them up. And that's how I find out the last of them. It would have been kind of handy to have somebody help me find them. But, like we're talking about, we got to be careful with this stuff. We don't want them knowing where all of our cattle are all the time. It's one thing if we know where they are, but I don't know if I want anybody else knowing where they are.
Yeah. And I think we also need to just be aware of incrementalism, because everything we're dealing with now started with one little thing that wasn't going to be a big deal. And then the next guy that comes into office takes more, and then the next guy takes more, and it's just incremental. And now here we are, 4 or 5 decades later, and we've lost more than half our cattlemen. They're gone. So
the slippery slope thing is real. Some people say, "Oh, that slippery slope argument is old and tired," but it's a real thing. And when we implement things that can be used in the future, we've created the infrastructure for things in the future to be used in a way that wasn't intended now. That's where we get in trouble. So we need to be thinking about we need to be playing chess here. What's the final move that's going to be made with this move that we're making right now? We need to always be playing chess when it comes to all this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, because we certainly know the other folks are playing chess. So if we're playing
right?
checkers and they're playing chess, then we lose. Yeah. Do you have hope for the future? Are
Right.
you seeing the necessary movements and changes that you feel like there's some hope, or do
Yeah.
you think we're still far off?
I don't know. I'm pretty hopeful, and I talk to a lot of guys. Some guys I date work with. I'm always hearing this. Ranching will be gone in another 3 or 4 decades, and I don't think I believe that.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm just pie in the sky about it, but I do believe that ranching is going to stick around. There's enough young people like my boys who are interested in doing this stuff, and but it is kind of on us in my generation. I'm a Gen Xer. We need to be encouraging people to think about this so that we can carry it on. It's kind of important, not just for our lifestyle, which is a big deal to me, and I want to protect it, but it's important for the nation. If we aren't able to produce enough food to feed this country, then we can be subject to a blockade. And we really need to avoid getting ourselves into that kind of a situation as a nation.
Yeah. Are you like most producers where you have an off ranch job?
Yeah, it's also ranch work. I organize brandings for neighboring ranchers that are bigger than mine. So I'll provide the crew and everything, and I'll organize these things, and we'll get their calves branded for them. And then in the fall, we'll get their stuff gathered and ready to ship for them. So I do that, and my wife has a job too. The old saying, for every successful rancher, there's a wife that works in town. So, you do what you got to do.
Yeah. So, this surprises a lot of consumers that are just disconnected from the lifestyle, that somebody would do a job that's so difficult, the job of ranching, and on top of that, work a job somewhere else just to be able to maintain that other job. Can you speak a little bit to that and why that is? I mean, the easy answer, it's a lifestyle, but maybe speak into that a little bit more if you can on why there's so much draw for you. I mean, it's a generational thing, of course, and there's that pride there too. But what is it that has you guys in particular be willing to work so hard to maintain that lifestyle?
Well, personally, I've just been somebody that's never really fit with any other lifestyle. Everything else I ever tried, other than backcountry guiding, was a great big flop. I mean, I even tried to join the patrol once because my mother was telling me that you got to get a real job and have real benefits and stuff. I tried to join the border patrol, and that turned out to be a flop. It's the only thing I'm good at.
Yeah.
Guiding people and ranching is all I've ever been good at. So that's kind of the personal deal. I'll do whatever I have to do to be able to do this. Right. I don't know. Most ranchers, except for the real big ones, have to come up with supplemental income of some kind, because even with the market the way it is now, you really do tend to put most of the ranch's profits back into the ranch, whether it's fuel or improvements, hauling water, which is a big thing in our part of the area, and so you have to work outside. You have to bring in other money in order to make it work. And, those of us that do it just love it enough that we're happy to do that, and the idea, at least for me, was I will do other jobs as long as I can, so that when I'm too old to do those other jobs, I can just have these cows in retirement and have my kids organize the brandings instead of me.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. I think the best way for folks to maybe wrap that around their heads for themselves is if you live in if you live in the city or whatever, if your hobby is like boating and you have a boat, the boat's not making you any money. You're you're probably working to maintain the fuel and the boat itself to enjoy it, because that's where you find peace. You like being out on the water. I would say that a lot of the guys I talk to, you could kind of draw that comparison. The boat ain't making you money, but that's where you find your peace and if that's where you find your peace and your happiness, you're willing to, you're willing to finance that so that you have that. And in your particular case, we're talking about ranchers and farmers financing our food production as Americans, which thank God somebody's doing that.
Right, right. I really like the way you put that, AJ. I think I have some think that I'm kind of fortunate in that in ranching, everything that I might enjoy is part of ranching. So, if I buy a horse, it's for the ranch. If I buy a truck, it's for the ranch. If I buy a Jeep, it's for the ranch, and so my peace and my recharge comes from being on my rangeland with my cows on a good horse, and especially when the grass is green and the baby calves are coming. And so luckily, everything that I'm going to spend money on goes toward what I want to do, goes toward that. So I don't have to buy a boat.
Yeah. Yeah. We didn't, my mom married a guy from town, and you know how it works. If my mom was my dad, I'd be a rancher. That's how I typically put it. But
Yeah.
mom didn't inherit the ranch. She married a guy that wasn't a rancher. My dad, he's wonderful. I'm grateful for the upbringing I had, and I don't regret any of that. But now that I'm on my own homestead, it took me, I'm 42 now. It took until about 40 years old. Finally got on my own homestead, little piece of ground. And I remember standing out on my porch and looking at 7.5 acres, 7.25 acres. And I'm just looking at this little piece. And if you've never been on a piece of ground like that, 7 acres is a lot to work. I mean, I can work all of it, but it's still a lot to do. And so I'm just thinking about it. I was like, man, I have a responsibility here. I have a chunk of ground that's under my care. And so as we're making money and looking at where we're putting it into the homestead, putting up perimeter fence, getting pastures ready, getting our garden ready. Because I just feel a tremendous sense of responsibility that because I've been blessed to have this piece of ground, now I have a responsibility for it and to take good care of it and to produce what I can on it and make it better than when I found it.
Yeah, that's a real big part of all this for me too, is trying to make things better than it was when I got here. Most of my focus has been on improving water, so hopefully future generations on this ranch won't have to haul water and stress and struggle the way I did and my grandfather did and everybody always did before me. Drought is a big deal down here. We don't have any dirt tank water. We're in trouble. So I've spent every extra penny on trying to develop wells and pipelines and drinkers so that even if the tanks don't fill up, we can still operate here.
Yeah. Say a little bit about that. What does it take to develop water on a ranch? You get 5 inches of rain. You definitely not got, flowing streams running through there that your cattle drinking. So when you improve water infrastructure on your ground, what goes into that? What does that take to be able to do that?
Okay. So like on a place like this, we have a bunch of, most people would call them ponds. We call them tanks. They were built back in the 30s and they collect runoff when we have a hard rain that will actually last close to a year once they fill up. But the problem is in the last 30 or so years, we don't always get the rain to fill those tanks up. Back in the old days, I guess they always did fill up, but they don't anymore. Sometimes we just don't get the rain. And so what I've been doing here is there is a great big wash that runs through this country. It starts way up on the Navajo Reservation. There's a lot of water. None of it is on the surface. So I have dug shallow wells, some of them with just a backhoe, next to this wash, and stuck culverts down in them and put little sun pumps down in those culverts to pump water. And I'm building just as many of them as I can. They're, I have to put little low flow solar water pumps in them that only will pump like 3 gallons a minute. If I do more than that, it'll pump them dry. And then you know what the problem is there. But so I'm doing a lot of that. It's really deep to get into aquifer water here. We're talking, $20,000 to drill a well that deep. But I can get to that shallow water, what we call top water, next to the wash. And so I'm doing a lot of that. And it's old school well digging, and but it does work. And so I'm doing just as much of that as I can to get me through those years when the summer rains don't bring enough runoff to fill the dirt tanks up.
Yeah. And I know this, but I'll bet that does a wonderful job for the local wildlife too, because you guys are there improving that access in that range, access to water.
That's a pretty important point. On this ranch, when I was a kid, we didn't have pronghorn antelope at all on this place, and we do now. And that's pretty because they have water now. They didn't used to. That's something maybe the public ought to consider when they're thinking about these ranchers out here in the desert.
Yep.
Those dry years, if we weren't here, that wildlife would not have any water.
Yeah. Yeah. It has me think back to when the government did what they did with Cliven's place, and they went in there and destroyed all their stock tanks and everything they had built just to ruin it and destroy it. And it did so much more damage than just to Cliven's cattle, because just think about the wildlife that after that many years could count on a water source, and then all of a sudden it's gone. How many of the wildlife choked to death because they went one place and there's no water, and then they go to the other and there's no water because the government showed up and destroyed them all. That's why that had me thinking about that, because I remember, listening to those guys talking about when they went on the property and they found the mass grave sites from all the cows they were killing and all the destroyed water tanks and all that. So, but yeah, that water improvement for that wildlife, it goes far beyond just the rancher, and the public should know that it benefits, far more than just what the rancher's doing. The land, the livestock, which we eat. And that's the thing. It's really frustrating, and maybe you've been in it long enough that it doesn't frustrate you as much as me, because I'm certainly frustrated when I hear when people don't fully understand how important our producers are. We're only 2 generations away from people knowing that if we don't have producers producing sustenance, we're going to starve. And the average consumer just thinks it's going to be in the grocery store.
Really do understand that their food does not come from a grocery store. People really do need to understand that they do depend on agricultural producers to not starve to death. And, agricultural producers are happy to go out and do that. And they don't make a lot of money doing it, but they're happy to do it. So I really cannot understand what this hostility toward agriculture is coming from. I do not understand it. People don't need to be hostile toward agricultural producers. The agricultural producers aren't bad guys. They don't mean any harm to anybody. They're just trying to make their living growing food. What's the harm in that? I really don't understand the hostility, and I really wish people would just stop that.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like there's, just like you, I do have hope there. Even with what we're doing, lots and lots of people coming in, and COVID, for all the bad things COVID did, it woke a lot of people up to their food system and their health. And so that's starting to make a difference for us all as we work to shore up our food system. Last question I have for you, Casey, is what difference would it make for your ranch if every head of cattle that you could finish was going right to a family that you knew or that was buying it direct from you? How big of a difference would that make for your operation if everything you could raise and finish?
Well, it would make a big difference. Well, it would be more profitable to us because we would be eliminating some middlemen, and not just one middleman, but a bunch of middlemen. As everybody knows, it's not just the meat packers, but it's the guys at the sale barn and the guys in between. You know, at the sale barn, they're going to a broker, and then they're going to another guy, and they're going to a wheat pasture somewhere. So it would be more profitable for me to go right straight to the consumer. So that's good for me. It's good for the consumer because they can come out here and look at the animal and find out with their own eyes what they're being fed, how they're being taken care of, you know. And I think it's a win-win all the way around.
Yeah. You're not putting any mRNA in there.
Yeah, they can they can ascertain what I'm giving them. You know, they can come here when the cattle are getting vaccinations and look if they want to. They can look at my syringes at when we're doing calf hood vaccinations and see what they're being given, you know. And
yeah,
I have no problem with transparency like that.
Yeah, and that's what folks want, and that's what we're here from the farm to try to do is help bridge that gap. I mean, ranchers don't need to be running around the ranch on a cell phone.
They just shouldn't.
Yeah. We got a little lag here, so I'm sorry. I was just saying that ranchers don't need to be running around with all the work they have to do on their cell phone being influencers just to sell their beef. Customers just need to know how to get a hold of them so that you can keep ranching. I was talking to my cousin. He's got a YouTube channel now, and when he was first starting out, he's like, man, do you know how dumb it feels to get off my horse, walk in front of it, set my camera down, go back, get on my horse, walk past the camera, get off the horse just to get that shot of me walking past. I feel like a fool out here in the middle of nowhere, and I'm just trying to get my job done, but I got to bring in extra revenue somewhere. And he goes, man, I feel so foolish.
Yeah, I started getting on social media in 2022, and it's been a little odd. I try to get on there early in the morning when I'm having my morning coffee, before I get started with morning chores, and then I might get back on it in the middle of the day when it gets hot. But it's been really weird, but I feel like I have to try to get on there, and network as much as I can. But the way I always lived, it's very alien to how I've always been. So it's very strange.
Yeah, but it's important. I mean, the producer should be on there when they choose and when it works for them and when they feel like it. It's the challenge of, in order to use that tool to build a business, you have to do it every single day and multiple times a day. Right. And so that's where the problem comes in. But I think ranchers now having a voice. I had this conversation with my uncle Arlen. I don't know if you know Arlen Hughes, but I had a conversation with Arlen about this, and I felt this was 5 years ago, 6 years ago, and I was telling him, I said, social media is leveling the playing field for producers, and I know we got a long way to go, but big ag. Between the big food labels and producers, social media is leveling the playing field, because there was a time where the only way you can compete is if you had enough money for television, ads or radio ads or newspaper ads that these guys all had the marketing budget for. But now you can grab your cell phone and be on a social media channel, generate 1 million followers and not pay a dime. Put some sweat equity into that, but you didn't have to pay for it. Now you're starting to level that playing field. And I think that's why the direct to consumer is growing so much, because now the producer has a voice and the consumer can hear from them and go direct and cut out all those middlemen. So social media has come in with some value if we use it for the right things, I believe. Yeah,
I agree. I'm really a small player on social media compared to everybody else, guys like you. I only have a tiny percentage of people who follow me, but still, that's way more people than I ever would have been able to reach before.
Yeah.
And so it really has been something that has worked out good. In the long run for me, I can get my voice out there about stuff.
Yeah. Well, I'm grateful for it. You and I connected on your X account. I was following you and watching the stuff you're talking about with the solar panels and stuff. So I'm grateful for it because I've met and been able to connect with so many producers across the nation. So yeah, it's a good thing. But so Casey, how can people find you? How can they get a hold of you? And selling beef, how can they find you to maybe buy from you if they're in your area? It sounds like you got to be fairly close to where you're at. You're not shipping anything yet, but if you're close by, they can buy from you. But how would you like people to get in contact? Just follow you on X?
Yeah, follow me on X. And my wife is the one who actually handles all the transactions on these deals. And so if they follow me on X and send me a DM on X, if they're going to be in Northeast Arizona looking for beef, I will get their information and I'll put them in contact with my wife, and she will handle a transaction if they're looking for something like that. It, like you say, it depends on what we have available. We don't always have a steer available that's ready, that's of a size to be butchered. So we'll have to coordinate that with people. But if I don't, I know a lot of other people, and I will hook you up with some other ranchers that I know quite a few of them are on a larger scale operation than I am. And I can definitely help people find somebody to get some beef in their freezer.
Yeah. Well, and I've learned too, like on the From the Farm website, we have a lot of producers selling shares, and they'll just put in the description, we're finished this out, it'll be done in 3 months. So they'll pay the deposit or they'll pay the full thing up front. And a lot of people like that because now they know it's going to be custom finished, like you were saying that you guys do. And then when it's ready, I mean, it's as fresh as you can get it because they're picking it up right from the packer or right from you as soon as it's out of the packer. So.
Right. Yeah, it's the best way to do it.
Yeah, great. Awesome. Well, Casey, it's such a pleasure to connect with you here. I'm sure we'll stay in touch more. But I appreciate you jumping on here. We'll just stay connected. I'll probably have you come back on and do it again. And next time I'll be in my home office so we're stable and I've got a nice setup there. So.
Yeah. Hey, I'm happy to come on, AJ. I'm a big fan of what you're doing. And
thank you.
Anytime you want to have me back on, you just let me know and I'll jump right at it.
Awesome. Okay. I'll be sure to do that. Hang out here for me a second. We'll play this outro as we leave, and then we'll make sure everything's downloaded.
Sounds good.
Since 2017, 150,000 farms have shut down. Working farmland has been reduced by 21 million acres. The system has been crippling the remaining farmers, forcing some to adopt nefarious farming techniques, like pumping hormones and other performance-enhancing drugs into their cows so they can survive in crammed feedlots. Or the farmers are forced to jump ship and sell to land-hoarding, profit-chasing agricultural oligarchies, who use their billions of dollars to crush the competition and increase your family's dependence on their manufactured food. What could possibly go wrong? The family farm will soon be a thing of the past, unless you do something. You can. That's why there's From the Farm, an industry-disrupting platform that connects consumers directly with local farmers, which means you can buy fresh, non-factory farm food, and you'll know exactly where your food came from and how it was raised. For the first time in nearly 100 years, independent farms will have a way to not only survive, but thrive. From the Farm was founded by AJ Richards, an active homesteader, and Brooke Entz, a CrossFit Games athlete and an Amazonian warrior in the movies Wonder Woman and Justice League. She clearly has a passion for healthy food and a healthy lifestyle. And since both AJ and Brooke come from generations of ranchers and farmers, they know what they're talking about. We can't do this alone. We need the strength of the American people behind us. Help us build a new food system that combines the wisdom of the past with the technology of the future. Investing in From the Farm isn't just a financial decision. It's an investment into our future. our small family farms, and our food sovereignty. Invest today.